bank as far as I know. Well, besides the other one was VBS. Yeah, but that one doesn't exist anymore. So
interesting. So I mean, as a concept, right? So I've done a deal here in Gauteng where the land was owned by a family, and then they gave this guy a 15-year lease with the option to extend for a further 15 years. And then he put up a filling station, and then he came to us in the bank to kind of raise money to build it, right? And then the lease is long enough, 15 years. Typically, a business loan will take 10 years to repay. So, from a finance perspective, we looked at it and we're like, look, it actually makes sense. He's got 15 years uninterrupted. Obviously, legal team vets the lease to see if there's any loopholes. But once everything is ticked, we did the deal. We don't have title deed because it belongs to the family, but we could actually bond the lease. So we could actually register the lease in deeds office, similarly to registering a marriage contract, etc. So which I found quite interesting to be like, okay, technically you can actually bond the lease, and I think maybe some of the large corporations at Ngonyama Trust, that's how they would sort of operate, agreeing whatever the terms are. Because some of those, they are large corporations, and that makes sense. But I'm just wondering, maybe there might be a loophole, not a loophole, but an opportunity rather, at individual level to consider that option where people can actually bond it. Even though you have right of use, but you could bond, you could find a way to say, let's make this a lease of some sort and put a time to it, and then the bank could actually try and match that time. Which kind of made sense, you know what I mean? At the end of that deal, what's going to happen is, so he'll have 30 years into that property. He'll be making money off, the filling station, fuel sold, etc. And then after the 30 years, the property is going to belong to the landowners, or the contract could say demolition, because he's kind of paying a lease on a monthly basis as well. So it's quite interesting that you could actually structure things around this ownership without actually owning a title deed. And it sounds like there's an opportunity here. Just that we need to figure out if we tie and those people. Figure out how to actually accommodate it. But it's quite interesting to know that we can actually find things.
Yeah, I think the main challenge is obviously standard bank arrangement, like we're saying, if you don't have title to the property, to get finance, which I'm assuming in a lot of these situations that people are starting up, whatever they're going to be, farming, mining, you need some form of financing. But if that asset is not collateral, then the conversations need to happen in terms of, if not loopholes, over and above land bank, government, where and who can step in to bridge some of those gaps. Because even if it's small time like horticulture, it's quite capital intensive. So I think what you probably find now is people might be allocated land, and whatever plans, viable or not, if there's no financing, I'm sure maybe in your experience you probably found that the trust, people are given land, but after a while the ventures don't last long because access to finance. I read a report, it's something we saw firsthand in Zim, with the redistribution of land. It was almost the same thing. A1 farms that you don't get title to it. It was custodianship to the chiefs of the government. But a bank was set up, and agri-bank, same kind of challenge, similar to land bank, where a lot of the hiccups and challenges were just around financing. Where your Barclays banks, Standard Chartered, the private banks, they will take their standard approach in terms of financing. So I think, and also another question I was asking is, with land that's been given to people as the chief and the Ngonyama Trust as custodians, do they have that role, like, if a facility with a bank, if in any way within the process of the ownership of that, if you're not delivering on the purpose that you got for the land, that they can retake it? Do they have that recourse? Or do they wait for just the tenure of that ownership to run through, like you said, and then it's passed on to someone else? Or can they step in at any time?
Technically, I think they can step in, but the tricky thing with the Ngonyama Trust specifically is that there's a lot of politics behind it. In honesty, it's the trust is a state-owned entity. If it's running a state-owned entity, as much as the king has influence on who sits on the board of trustees, but so do politicians. You know,
Yeah.
so the minute
Politicians from KZN or just
National.
national?
I think it's both, because the budget for the trust comes out of the Premier's office in KZN, but the entity itself belongs to national government. Yeah, so I think it's both, but I know for sure that the budget and closer oversight is at provincial level, but the entity itself is formed at national level.
Yeah, actually, I had a look at those financials. They look unprofitable. It's big money, hey? Yeah, it's interesting because I actually realized as I was reading that as well that, especially with Ingonyama Trust, it was actually being touched just around the nationalization of, not nationalization, what do you call it?
Redistribution.
Yeah,
Right.
like
Appropriation.
appropriation without compensation. People keep touching that land, but I was like, actually, it already belongs to the state. This shouldn't be a conversation. I think a lot of people just figured because the benefits sometimes filter through to some of the politicians, etc. They figured that the Ingonyama Trust is it's almost like a independent trust, just like how typically we would fund our own trusts that are not state-owned. People didn't realize. So I was like, actually, whether you amend the constitution or not, this wouldn't matter to this one particular, just because, like you said, it's already a state-owned entity.
Yeah, no, the land effectively belongs to the state. It's that the king is a beneficiary and plays oversight. But the reality is that the land already belongs to the state. If the state were to decide that they want to take that land and redistribute it and issue title deeds, they probably could. It would be a big political mess, but they could.
Yeah. And also the audits around it to confirm who owns, because it can be a bit messy. Because I saw that they were trying to actually get to a stage where they could issue those title deeds. They were just trying to make efforts to do it, but I can tell that it's not going to be as easy as it sounds.
Nah, it's not gonna be easy. In my own view, maybe with the new king, we might still maybe see a change. But with the old king, I could almost bet that it wasn't gonna happen. It's maybe now we need to wait and see how the new king behaves, and he's
progressive.
But I don't think it's ever gonna happen.
So
I doubt it.
So tell me, so typically, with urban land, there's rates and taxes, there's all of that stuff. So in this instance,